What's up, everybody? This is Donnie Stern, bringing you another episode of whatever the series is called. And I'm already into the action right now, so no introduction. I'll just get right into it. Before I bet this ace nine off, I'm going to call this jack 10 to the very small river bet. It's probably basically the guy just raised. I called and he bet 3 streets and just called out. Maybe he could have gotten me to fold in the river if he bet a substantial amount, but the amount he bet, I don't think I could fold. I'm opening ace 8 suited under the gun here. Probably pretty borderline. I just folded 10-8 off in the cutoff. That's also probably pretty borderline. I feel like I'd always raise ace 9 suited under the gun. Ace 8 seems like it starts getting close around there. Ace 7 I'd probably fold. I think I've argued with some people about what's better, ace 5 suited or like ace 7, ace 8 suited. The suited aces that can make a wheel. I think for the most part, the middle suited aces are better in today's 100 big blind poker game. Just because the value of flopping a 7 versus flopping a 5, I think is better, and there's just more. Your opponents play way more hands that have 7 in them that you dominate. Not really that important of a topic, honestly, but since there's nothing going on right now, just thought I'd throw that out there. I'm going to 3-bet this king jack off. It's like obviously pretty weak for an under the gun for something like +1, but I'd like to isolate this guy, play a pawn position against him. This is something that HeyPad has done a bunch of times versus me, and I haven't had the opportunity to call him whenever he's done that. I'm a little tempted to check back the king jack because we're a little bit shallow, so if he check raises me, I might not be able to call the king jack. Sometimes I'll check back and through a positive spot when I flop a draw, if I think that there's some chance of getting blown off my hand. I don't think this 8 is a terrible card to check back. I rarely would check back. I mean, for the most part, am a pretty big proponent of barreling with your draws, but in this particular spot against this particular guy, I think I have less than normal fold equity against his like 10x type stuff, and I think I have a higher than average likelihood of getting paid off on the river when I hit if I take a free card. The ace is obviously not as good as the 9, I think. Just can't have a lower straight. You can't have as many 2-pair hands. I check called in the top left with the queen jack after flatting pre. I'm going to check fold this river. Well, check decide this river is really what it is. I'm continuation betting this ace king in the top on the bottom left. Certainly could just be a check calling situation. It's not like I ever expect him to fold a pair really when I bet the flop. So my bet is somewhat for value. I mean, it is for value. It's not somewhat for value. I'm betting ace king for value. Blind versus blind when it comes queen, queen, 4. He's going to call with most ace highs. He might call with some king highs. And there. But the result justifies what I was saying to an extent. I mean, he called with ace jack, which is obviously just one notch below what I had. But I still would expect him to call with worse ace highs than that quite often. I'm going to barrel again with this ace deuce. I do think he has a reasonable amount of king X hands just from flatting the small blind. He's gonna have a lot of like just big broadways, but he's also gonna have a lot of pocket pairs. You know, sixes, eights, nines, those things. I might be able to get him forward here. He also could have some weaker stuff, and of course I do have a gut shot to go with it, which got there in the river. Not like a super strong straight or anything. Six beats me obviously, but he doesn't have too many sixes considering he has somewhat taggy stats and he flatted in the small blind, so I don't think he has much other than pocket sixes here if he has a straight. I wonder if he might check raise bluff here. It wouldn't be a terrible spot. My stats are a little bit looser than they usually are today. 2.4 thousand hands, 26, 21. I definitely don't usually play that loose. It's usually closer to 24, 23. But I guess today I've been feeling frisky. Three bet this kings to 21. So one's a little bit big. I think I could probably make it 19 or something there. In general, when you squeeze, I mean, when it's heads up pot, I'm in this sort of spot where it's button versus big blind. I'm pretty happy to raise more than the size of the pot. When I'm out of position, when it's a squeeze, even though I'm up against two players, I think since you start getting higher up on the stack to pot ratio, that it's less important to make a greater than pot size 3-bet when you're out of position. You can get away with making undersized raises and you'll still have very good fold equity. So obviously I'm getting in my pocket kings there. He just had queen 9 for a straight draw. Definitely not the best play there by him. It's a little too deep to be just snap getting in a gut shot, especially on a flush draw board. I'm going to barrel again with my king queen here, I think. I want to set myself up to be able to bluff some rivers. Obviously, I can't really bluff with offsuit 3 river, I don't think. I mean, there's definitely times when I go bet jam on a blank river in a certain situation like this, especially if I think my opponent is equally or sometimes even more likely to have second pair rather than top pair. That's the type of spot I might consider it in. I'm going to check back the kings in the bottom there. Check back the ace-10 here, fold the king queen. Gonna reluctantly fold the eights to a raise there. That might have been really nitty. I folded the eights there because my hand can't improve. It's very vulnerable to a flush draw or to even just like ace high. There's basically no turn card that I'm happy with except for one that gives me a set. Not exactly. I mean, it's a somewhat nitty fold, but I mean, if I'm, it's just hard to continue with such a vulnerable one pair hand in that sort of spot. I'm calling this 3-bet with 7-9 suited when he 3-bets to just 14. I mean, we're only 50 big blinds deep, but that's not nothing. It's not, you know, there's still plenty of play post flop. Definitely just calling. I'm 993 rainbow. I'd have to have a pretty good reason to raise this flop. I'm not saying I never raise when I flop huge on like a rainbow, on like a very drawless board. There are definitely spots where I think it's correct to. But as a default, if I don't know anything about this guy, which I clearly don't know anything about him, he does have a funny avatar. I think as a default, calling is just an overall better play. I'm betting on the turn. I probably could have bet smaller. Betting like 18 is probably better than what I bet. I bet way too big. Can open 6-9 suited here, even though it's probably not the best play with reasonable players behind. I got limp raised, and I have threes. I gave up with my ace-8 over there, board pairing 9. I have some showdown value with ace-high, and I don't expect him to fold too many pairs. I get limp raise and then he checked that flop, so it's kind of suspicious. I'm a little bit afraid of what he has here. I kind of want to call because he bet only 1/3 pot. So confused. I think I have to fold 3s. I mean, it's pretty much the worst thing to call with there. Except, obviously, king high or something. This video does feel a little bit lower energy than usual. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm playing very late at night. Or maybe it's just because it's only 1-2. But hopefully get some crazy things happening. Obviously, definitely going to just call my 10-8 suited here. I'd hesitate to 3-bet with this hand in this spot because in some ways it's too good of a hand to 3-bet. I'd rather have a little bit more of a polarized 3-betting range in this spot. There's very strong hands. Obviously, I want to 3-bet, and then I think it's not that 10-8 suited is that much further, but I'd rather, if I had to balance it, I'd say calling with 10-8 suited and 3-betting 10-7 suited is a better overall strategy than the opposite. I think the strength of my hand is more relevant when I just flat. The fact that I have that much more flopability with 10-8 suited or 10-9 suited rather than 10-7 suited or 10-6 suited. That's what makes it important because we're deeper and I'm playing multi-way. Having a hand that can hit the nuts is that much more important. It's kind of like in PLO. Whereas just flopping a pair, just flopping a flush draw, just goes way up in value when you're in a 3-bet pot. So that's why the difference between 10-6 suited and 10-9 suited is not nearly as exaggerated as it is when it's a single raise pot. So this guy 3-bet, or this guy open and then check call the flop. And I check back the the offsuit jack on the turn. I mean, part of me wants to bet thinking he probably has a lower pocket pair than me, but I'm still a little bit afraid he could have kings or queens, or he might just check fold if he has king high anyway. Maybe I should have bet. That might have been a dumb check. I'm just a little nervous with the time bank running out. I didn't want to waste too much. I probably should have bet like 1/3 pot in the river there, and then just fold if he raised, or call if he raised. I don't know. Okay, this guy bet 1 big blind, so I'm gonna peel my ace-10 off. I mean, I'm just gonna call, chop it up the ace high. I'm not like thrilled about this, but this guy can have probably tons of stuff. I do think he just calls with mostly any pair. But I have ace king. I have a gut shot, 2 overs, and backdoor flush draw. Just getting him to fold, his like smaller pocket pairs and things is pretty relevant. I don't know. Maybe that was a little bit loose. Not sure. I'm going to call queen 9 off to basically what is a min raise. I talked about it in this last video, but I'm experimenting wouldn't exactly be the right word, but I'm trying to play much looser in the big blind lately, especially versus guys who min raise, especially versus guys who min raise in late position and therefore have very wide range. I think the current trend in heads up poker has been playing increasingly loose from the big blind, and it's sort of like just a trend over time in poker. It seems like this guy limp raised me, and I only have king 10 off. It's such a small amount, and I'm in position. I am going to call. This might have been too loose if he actually has like a... This is the same guy who limp raised me before, isn't it? Yes, it is. Oops. It's timed out while looking for that hand. I gotta stop doing that. Anyway, what I was saying is that it's been sort of like a trend in poker in the way people play. Seems increasingly people just keep getting looser and looser in the big blind, in the blind defense. So I think that's definitely the right direction to be headed in. And tournaments, I mean, don't even get me started in tournaments. When guys at a 9-handed table where everybody's anteing and they min raise in late position with like 10-5 offsuit, doing anything other than like calling with a huge percentage of your range, calling or 3-betting, would just be a huge mistake. And that's not to that same extreme in cash games, first of all, because you're deeper, and so being out of position hurts you that much more. Secondly, people are probably not nearly as psychotic with their opening ranges. And third, obviously, not being an ante greatly affects your pot odds that you're getting. But still, you know, just in general, when somebody min raises in late position, cash games, and I am, you know, closing the action with 2 big cards, and min raised, frequently going to just call. I'm going to 3-bet this A7 suited. I think there's several options here. He has somewhat passive pre-flop stats, so I want to go ahead and 3-bet. I'm obviously folding now. Just folded that 7s to 3-bet from the guy with the nitty stats. I've been trying to find, there's been a lot of spots lately, it's just, I think, just through bad luck or whatever, that I've had a lot of spots lately where I've been in the small blind or the big blind and it goes raise 3-bet in front of me. And I have like really borderline hands of whether or not I think I should 4-bet to get it in. Like, you know, just ace, queen, 10s, you know, could be, I mean, that borderline could also be 9s. Or, you know, 9s or 8s or jacks, depending on who the opponents are. I'm going to call here closing action, A7 suited, and I probably, I don't know, I'll probably continue backdoor flush draw. I'm probably going to peel here. I don't think I have to check call this flop with ace high. It's not, I mean, the fact that I have a7 high, there's a pretty big difference between my hand and like ace jack. But I do think that I can win the pot against a hand like that, like ace king by the river, a decent percentage of the time if he checks back the turn. I decided not to bet the river because I felt I had enough showdown value and I didn't think he'd fold ace high, but probably could have bet and at least free rolled against what is very likely ace high. I'm going to check back this ace queen in the bottom right. I think is a reasonable flop, a reasonable hand to check back on this flop with. It's the type of flop that I'm like pretty happy to see betting almost all of my range. But if you want to sort of balance, sometimes checking back queens and jacks and things like ace queen, I think that's perfectly fine, especially against a guy who, I don't know him yet, but he has very like fishy stats through 9 hands, which pretty much doesn't mean nothing. It means something, but it's not like super reliable or anything like that. I mean that, you know, that hand right there is a good example. The results are a good example of sort of knowing when to c-bet, when you can sometimes take a flop off. The importance of of selecting what hands you sometimes see bet with and sometimes don't. The fact is, you're not going to just like have some sick read on the guy when he just flats pre and he checks the flop. Like, he can have anything. So when you determine what hands you're checking back and what hands you're c betting with, it's pretty much just a theoretical decision, and it has to have some good philosophy behind it for it to be right. And I think my hand makes a lot of sense to check back against somebody who might be playing too many hands. The fact is, like, when it gets to showdown, it goes check check. I'm going to beat hands like the ones he had. That justifies checking back my hand a little bit more. Whereas if I had something like 9-10 suited with no showdown value, if I check that back all the way to the river, I lose the pot to crappy ace highs and queen highs and jack highs and whatever. If I bet it though, I at least can take it down versus a lot of his weaker hands. I'm going to make a squeeze here. I don't think this is like a mandatory squeeze hand. I tend to just have more suited hands when I do something like this. Just very frequently. I'm just going to have suited hands a lot more. I think I have to c-bet this flop, even though I do think he has a decent amount of pocket pairs. Some of the pocket pairs he's most likely to have, independent of my hand, would be 9s and 10s. But I'm blocking that, so it makes it a little bit less likely he has it, and that much more likely that he has something like ace-jack suited, ace-queen, that type of stuff. So I hit a 10 on turn, which is obviously a good card for my hand, but it's not good enough to bet again, I'm pretty sure. He might continue calling with 8s and 9s, but he also can have jacks, queens, kings, aces. He was slow playing it at pocket 6s, pocket 7s. I don't think this guy has 8-9 suited in his range, but it's possible. And a lot of the hands that I'm doing really well against, I'm not vulnerable against them at all, so I don't need to keep them in really. I don't need to price them out or charge them basically. I'm going to peel one more card here. I'm going to call. I'm not terribly nervous about getting bluffed here. If he's bluffing, it's with a very well played, ace queen or something like that. Okay, down here in the bottom right, I'm going to fold the 9-10 really quick, and I'm just going to go all in with this. This guy, Jazz, is playing completely crazy. So when he cold 4-bets, I can't give that the same respect that I would to other cold 4-bets, obviously. 10s, I think, is a fist pump jam. It starts getting closer with each and every pair as you move down. In most situations, moving down a pair when making a decision is always just going to be like a couple of points of EV, basically. 10s, I think, is clear, get in. 9s, I still think I would get in. And then it starts getting really close around 8s. Because the thing is also, obviously, there's another player behind who might call. And back to that other hand, the 9-10 hand. I think I played that well. I need to have a tricky range, though, on that river to be calling enough, though. I think a lot of people might say in that hand, well, you didn't call 9-10. That's probably pretty close to the top of your range there. How often are you checking, check calling queens on the turn or something like that? The truth is, you're right. I'm probably not check calling queens on the turn very often. But I would consider it with some of my stronger hands that were stronger than queens that I got there with. I'm just calling the kings in the bottom right just because I think he's bluffing so often. Peeling 3-bet there, peeling 3-bet here. And I'm going to bet in top left. I'm not betting this turn super wide or anything like that. I do think it hits him some decent percentage of the time, but I think I have to bet when I have 10 high and a straight draw. I think that's more or less mandatory. I'm going to take free card here on the top right. I mix it up between going bet there on pretty much 100% of cards, and sometimes taking a free card. I think it's important to do both in that situation. Would be real shame if your opponent always knew what you did with a flush draw there. And it's also a spot where I don't think it's uncommon to see people getting tricky and checking something strong on the turn there. And then some of the queen nine hand. I'm going to call 3-bet there with queen jack suited. Pretty much a mandatory flat, in my opinion, as long as you have a calling range versus 3 bets out of position, which I know some people basically don't. In this spot, I'm not thrilled about taking a passive line when I have a pretty decent draw, but no showdown value. In general, I like to be the aggressor with this type of hand. But I don't think I have much of a choice once I check the flop. I think my hand's not good enough to check raise, get it in, especially because he probably would at least consider getting it in with ace jack and ace queen. And versus ace king, I'm going to have 7 outs. I'm going to jam this on the turn. I think it's important to get him to fold a lot of his bluffs that are beating me. I don't really ever expect him to bet fold this turn for value. And I think my hand looks a lot like what it is, but I don't think it matters that much. It's strong enough of a draw that even if he calls a huge percentage of the time, it's fine. I still, because I need such a, basically, I mean, obviously, the stronger your draw is, the less fold equity you need in it. And I expect him literally never fold ace king, obviously. I'd expect him never to fold any king. But as I was saying, the less, or the better your equity is when called, obviously, the less fold equity you actually need when you're getting to the river, or when you're getting, sorry, when you're semi bluffing like there on the turn, and in that spot, he doesn't ever really need to fold. He doesn't ever really need to make a value bet and then fold. He just needs to fold his ace queen and ace jack some percentage of the time, because even that I think he might, get tricky and try to put me on something like what I had. But I still think he usually folds those hands. And obviously he could be barreling with some random like 6 or a random 7. And what if the river completely breaks off and I check called, and I guess you gotta get in this 4 is blind versus blind. What if the river completely breaks off and I had just check called, and then it gets to showdown and I lose to like bottom pair when I could have won the pot on the turn. I don't think I need much of an explanation for why I needed to jam queen jack of hearts there on the turn, really. I think it's pretty standard. This is a reasonable spot for a cold 4-bet. King 8 suited is around one of those hands that I'd say is good enough, but absolutely under no circumstances mandatory to cold 4-bet. I'd say, if I'm in that spot with something a little bit better than King 8 suited, I might feel obligated to 4-bet it. I'm just going to fold this, it's a cold 4-bet. I'm just going to fold the deuces here. Folding deuces in small blind. Pretty sure that's ridiculously standard fold. Something a little bit stronger than King 8 suited, like I said, would be closer to being a mandatory 4-bet. When I have something that's crappier like King 8 suited, I'm much more concerned with my opponent and exactly his stats in the situation, the opener, and his exact stats. Whereas if I had something a little bit better King 8 suited hand, I might say, you know, I have to have something like this in my cold 4-bet range. It has to be something, you know, like Queens plus, Ace King, and then something silly like King Jack suited or something like that. But there's obviously people against whom I would fold almost everything except for value hands. I'm calling here with threes. Not exactly like. I mean, for the most part, I fold threes in small blind versus a raise, but I guess I'm playing a little bit looser for trying to have fun on the video, trying to get into more situations. Fold. I'm gonna give up, at least on the flop, with my 6-9 suited. You guys, very nitty stats. I'm gonna take a stab on the turn probably. And this might be one of those spots. I sometimes mix it up and take a stab on the turn, and other times just wait till the river and hope he checks again and then take a stab. I'm gonna bet again. I'm just gonna bet on this turn. I have my reasons for why I'm calling threes here. This is again another spot where folding is probably good against most people. 100 big blinds deep, I would definitely always fold. I think I'm a little bit more compelled to call here. I'm going to check fold, even though the flop had no big cards. Anytime he's 3-betting with anything speculative, that crushes his range. And it's also a spot where he's somewhat likely to not c-bet with his big cards there, so folding threes seems good. I'm just going to say I'm a little tired, and I'm probably not 100% right now. That 3 is that last one. The first one, whatever. The last one, that's definitely, I think, a fold out of position. There's just no reason to assume that you have great implied odds with your if you flop a set against somebody who's shown no certainty that he's going to just auto stack off every time you hit a 3. And then, so that, you might say, okay, well, on the flip side is that means that you can win the pot, other ways, because he doesn't have only strong hands. So why not call, potentially bluff? The problem is, threes is pretty much going to always be one of the worst hands you can bluff with. You're never going to have semi-bluffing opportunities. You're not going to have much of any sort of like blocking opportunities. Just pretty much is always the worst hand in your range possible unless you flop a set. Just need to go over again how bad little pocket pairs are, and how sometimes if you're playing sloppy, you can trick yourself into saying, "Oh, I'm just going to call this one." I think I'll stack him. I think I can stack him if I hit a set. It's just usually just pure garbage. I actually called in this spot earlier today, in this almost exact same spot where both players were kind of like around 200 big blinds deep, and I was in big blind. And I ended up winning a pretty big pot, probably because I called, but I decided to 3-bet this time. I think 3-betting, wow, and I almost never checked that flop, but I just randomly decided to check the flop. I think I'm not going to get 3 streets of value out of like King Jack from one of them, for the most part. And my hand is obviously not vulnerable at all. So I thought maybe check the flop, get a little deception. I don't think anyone would ever expect me to have a hand as strong as Ace King once I check the flop. I think it just looks a lot like Queens and Jacks. But still, probably betting the flop is just better because they still just peel with all of their every Broadway combination they can have except for Ace Queen and Ace Jack. They would peel that flop. I think checking that flop was not good. I don't know why I did it. Something just came over me and made me click the check button. I used to value stuff like that a lot more, I think, of randomly taking an action that may be slightly worse, but it's not quite clear that it's actually slightly worse. It could be, around neutral. Um, certainly checking there is worse if that was like your overall game plan always to check there. I mean, you can't do that more than you bet. But maybe it's possible that a balance of like 90% bet and 10% check or something like that can fit into like an overall game plan. I used to be much more obsessed with doing that and throwing in random sort of different actions, because at the very least I may deceive my opponents who see that hand played out and think that that's standard for me, or they're going to see a lot more of that from me. But in terms of an actual like in a vacuum hand play, there's just almost no way that checking that flop can be better in the vacuum, I don't think. So I guess what I'm saying is, unless you have a good reason to do it, either that being specific players in their hand, or you think it's going to play in to some sort of metagame approach really well, for the most part, I think just avoiding randomly checking strong hands in that spot is good, unless you really know why you're going to do it. And like I said, I used to value that a lot more. I think I used to value sort of just randomly taking weird lines, because I think I saw a lot of people who did that against me, and it gave me a lot of trouble sometimes. And so I thought if I incorporated that into my game, it would be good. And I still do to a certain extent. But I think I'm more focused now on, because I think everybody's gotten so much better, focused more on, in a given spot, thinking about my entire range and establishing a range to counter my opponent's range that makes sense, and to be consistent with most of my actions. And in this spot, I 3-bet pocket threes. And I get one of the worst flops possible, so I'm going to check fold. Just another example of why threes or any baby pocket pair can be so weak in so many situations. And it's hard for me to find a right answer for them. I should probably 3-bet this king jack off. Actually, with the players behind, it's not terrible. Just call it. Gonna call with my 7-9, and I hit unbelievable card. Obviously, my draw here is very deceptive. 7-9 suit is not exactly going to be jumping out at him when I raise pre-bet call with flop. I'm just going to jam it in on this turn. I think this is a spot where, first of all, if he has any of his many semi-bluffs, I'm better off jamming it now. Obviously not giving him a free river. And if he has any kind of value hand, there's just tons and tons of disaster rivers for me. And he folded, so he almost certainly was just semi-bluffing himself. We got a few more minutes to do this video with. 3-bet this kings here against this guy from Poland. Sorry, you guys went out of the Euro Cup so early. Looks really good in the first couple games. I guess part of what I was talking about earlier about trying to incorporate a little bit of randomness almost into your game. The reason I've sort of strayed away from it recently, I think, is when you think about all the hands you can have when you raise there, you 3-bet, and then you check that flop, and all the hands that you can raise there that you can go 3 streets of value with. And if you're constructing any kind of a range, it just makes more sense for ace-king to always be on the more aggressive one. I'm going to 4-bet this aces. This is a spot where I'd sometimes flat, but I'm out of position, so I'm a little bit less likely to flat. And because I think since we're somewhat deep, we have like 1.5 stacks to start the hand. I think he's going to flat. Well, I thought he was going to flat call my 4-bet sometimes, which is obviously great when I have pocket aces. And like I was saying, since part of my overall game plan when I'm in position, I get 3-bet is going to be a lot more calling, less 4-betting, and less folding. As a result, I balance that by calling with aces a lot of the time. And here we go. We're going to call with 3s again, but this is different. This time it's a min raise and I'm on the button. This one I'm actually very happy to call with. And this table is not the best table to open ace-8 suited with. I'm going to raise this. I'm going to make a small raise. This is just, I think I have a reasonable chance of having the best hand, but calling is such a disaster in a 3-way pot. And if he 3-bets me, I just pretty much always know I'm drawing dead. So in a sense, I'm almost raising to see where I'm at. Although I hate that term. And wow, it's like 3s must be the theme of this video. And this one, again, I think this one's actually a clear call. Effective stack size is not bad. Our opponent is a huge nit with 0% 3-bet over 75 hands. That actually helps us. A lot of time with pocket pairs, it's better to just have good raw equity. I'm just going to check this 3s and give up pot pretty much. A lot of time with pocket pairs, especially like the middle pocket pairs, them having a really wide range can potentially be good for you because just your raw equity being better is always kind of like a bonus. And having better raw equity is more of a bonus when you have a hand that reasonably can get to showdown and win that much more often. When I have pocket 7s and I don't flop a set, there's still boards where I might call river bet, call turn flop bets, whatever. That's just not really the case with 3s. So with 3s, you have to be much more reliant on your implied odds against him when he has a monster hand. Since that's pretty much the only out you have really is stacking a monster hand. So that is a situation where I think I'm more concerned with. I actually want to have less equity, basically. I want him to have more aces and kings and queens and less, 10-8 suiteds. Definitely you want him to have less 10-8 suiteds. Well, this is definitely a get-in situation against an opponent who's, at the very least, somewhat aggressive. I wouldn't be 3-betting 10s to 3-bet fold them. Although I do flat 10s in this situation plenty of times. The first time, I wouldn't flat the 4-bet. Looks like he's bluffing. All right, so after this ace-5 suited hand, unless something else comes up, I'm going to call quits in this video. That's it. So, as always, everybody post in the forum questions, comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Though I will be in Vegas by the time this video gets onto the internet, and it'll be playing in the World Series, so it might be a little bit tougher, but I will in time. Let me check races 19 off here. Okay, I'll play until the blinds come around. Well, this was a good late night session. All the 2-5 games are full. So I decided to flat my 9s here. We're a little bit deep. We're almost 200 big blinds deep. So 3-betting 9s doesn't really have the same appeal. You 3-bet 9s when you're 100 big blinds deep, because first of all, you'll sometimes get it in against pocket 8s, pocket 7s pre-flop, which is great for you. That's just never really going to happen when you're this deep. You're not going to be comfortable getting it in. And I'm going to raise this flop. I definitely flat this flop a lot. There's a lot of people. I think it's an option. I wouldn't hate it if I did. But the fact is he bet kind of small. I want to give myself the opportunity to win a big pot and build a pot. Now, when he bets kind of small, maybe I should take that as a sign that he's really weak when his C-bet is like, 50%, 55% pot or 60% pot, whatever it was. Then again, it might just be that's his standard bet size there. I'm not sure. I don't know the guy that well. So I think it's something I talk about in a lot of videos is don't get too obsessed with like specific bet sizing tells and stuff. And in certain spots like that when you just have no idea. You're not really sure what it means. I mean, in that spot, it seemed like it might have been kind of weak. But then again, it might be one of the, you never know. He might be the guy that's, betting really small because he thinks it looks weak. And then he thinks he's inducing or something like that. I am going to call again with my Jack 9. I'm planning on folding now on this river. I think it's not unreasonable to assume that this guy would give up on certain cards. He might not give up on a king, though, and maybe that means I should call. But I think my original plan of folding is better just because it hits his range a little bit. Maybe folding the turn is okay against this guy. Either way, I'm going to fold. All right, so that's it. Questions, comments, forum, all that. I'll see you guys next week.